The options strategies we're using right now, they're not that elaborate and a person can learn them. In the stock markets, is this a good time to have options and choices? Yeah, I'd say it's a really good time.
Entrepreneurs rise from anywhere. Poverty doesn't need to be explained.
Right.
Really what needs to be explained is our wealth, our prosperity. Where did that come from? And how do we get more of that? How do we generate more of that for everybody globally? What companies do you admire? Great, let's buy those companies in our portfolios. Let's not worry about what the market's gonna do tomorrow. Let's not worry about people telling you it's gonna crash next year, those kinds of things. Think about being an investor for the rest of your life, and let's start doing it the real way, the way that works.
Most people that aren't doing well financially, they have 0 books in their house on wealth. They have 0 friends that are making the amount of money they want to make. And they're not surrounding themselves with an appropriate relationship when it comes to money. You actually are living the life that you're choosing right now. You got to risk your muscle to make your muscle better. You have to risk your money to make your money better. It's not about a home run. Most people want to get like 100% return on their money, like 1,000% return. If you could find a way to get 8 or 10% every 8 years in your money doubles.
Yeah.
And that's the part most people don't realize. They're looking for this large thing instead of realizing the secret is in consistency. I have 7 or 8 mechanisms going all at once that are producing wealth for me. And my job is to, how can I do what I love all the time and have money coming in regardless?
Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Money Revealed 2020. This is a 9-part docuseries, so we're about a third of the way through when we're done with this episode. I am so excited about what's coming up. What we have covered so far for many people has already been impactful and life-changing, and there's so much more to go, so stay engaged, stay tuned in. If you want to revisit this information over and over again and have it on demand, you can certainly own Money Revealed 2020. And quite frankly, I encourage you to do so, not only for yourself, but this can make a great gift for somebody else. Right here on this page, there are varying packages that you can choose from. Take a look at what we have. See what's right for you. Maybe it would make a good gift for someone else. We're living in uncertain times. Certainly, having the right information, having the right experts giving you advice is important right now. That's why we created this series, to bring it to you so that you can have this. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate your trust. I'm glad that you're here with me right now. Episode 3 is a whale of an episode. So let's jump right in and get to work. If you saw part 1 of my 2-part interview with Andy Tanner, you got moved in a big way and saw what great opportunities there are today in the markets as they exist. In part 2, we're going to now dive even deeper. Enjoy this interview. Andy, here we are again. We had part 1 of your interview, which really covered a lot of ground and I think set the stage for this second part of the interview. And this is to talk about options and options trading and maybe the considerations around this, especially in today's world. Some interesting things are happening, and just full disclosure, you're like my go-to guru on this stuff. As a matter of fact, just to let people know, my son and I got on a Zoom call with you. You trained us on some things and walked us through varying aspects of understanding options and what's going on in volatility and those varying aspects. And I was fascinated by it, and I want to share this with people. So let's start with maybe the notion of trading options in today's market. What's going on, and is it crazy? Is it like crazy town right now, or how do you see it?
Well, it would begin with understanding what an option is to help answer that question. And I often use the term choice. Mm-hmm. What's another word for a choice that starts with an option? Yeah. And so choices are nice to have. They can put you in a position of power. Mm-hmm. It's not a mandate, right? There's a freedom to an option. I don't have to do something, but I could do it if I wanted to, so I have a choice. And part of the problem with stocks is you have lots of risk because you have very little control. You know, if I'm a flipper of a home, I suppose, I can use forced appreciation. I can say, well, we're going to renovate this, and we're going to fix the management, we're going to force appreciation, great. But when you buy a share of Apple, there's not much you can do.
Right.
And so what options do is they give us choices about when we can buy things and when we can sell things. So when people say, oh, options are risky, you know, that's crazy, derivatives and, you know, nutty stuff, actually options are often used. In fact, I would say that the reason they were created by and large is to bring some stability to your ability to buy and sell at certain places. And yeah, it costs a little money. So think about it this way. Insurance. You know, would it be a good time to have, you know, right now we have California that's on fire. And I don't mean to be light or flippant about that because people are losing their homes. But there's part of me that thinks the real news story would be if California wasn't on fire. They're just always having this problem. Is it a good time to have insurance on your home in California? It's a good time to have fire insurance right now?
You bet.
So when you say, Andy, this environment right now we're in the stock markets, is this a good time to have options and choices? Yeah, I'd say it's a really good time, both as a buyer and a seller of options. So hopefully we can have time to talk about both and introduce both today.
Well, you spoke before we started rolling. You were talking about the volatility indexes.
Yeah.
And you said that one of the indications from what you've seen in the market, and I want you to explain this, and I wanted to wait till the cameras were rolling before you did, but you said one of the things is that people are more afraid of the Fed not supporting the market than they are of COVID-19. So what did you mean by that?
Well, let's take a chance for some education on what the VIX is. It's called the VIX. I've written a couple articles on this. They call it the fear gauge. And so let's really help people understand this by speaking about insurance premiums. If I have a bunch of DUIs and a bunch of tickets and I still have a driver's license, obviously my insurance premiums will go higher. If you're like my wife and you drive very carefully and the kids are in the back, you know, soccer mom type stuff, your insurance premiums go down. So all the VIX is it says, look, when you look at the S&P 500, all these 500 companies, and you're worried about them falling, how much would you pay to guarantee your sell price? So we talked about the choice. Mark Cuban had a company called Broadcast.com, and he sold it to Yahoo for stock instead of cash. Now, why would he choose stock instead of cash? Well, stock's going to go up. Cash probably going to go down. Well, he purchased some put options. He purchased some of these contracts that gave him the choice to sell high even if they went down low. So it's an insurance deal. And when they say, hey, Mark, Yahoo barely even around anymore. What happened to all your shares? He goes, you know, well, I was covered and then some. I had insurance coverage. I had contracts that allowed me to sell high when things were low. So the question is, if you want to be able to sell high, if the market drops low, how much are you willing to pay for that? Well, that's what the VIX is. The VIX just says, look, based on the implied volatility of how scary things are, how much will people pay? So when you look at, you know, I'd say probably going in the end of 2018 into 2019, the Federal Reserve is looking at their magazine and their gun. They're saying, well, where's our interest rate here? We've shot all the bullets. We've gone to zero interest rates. All those bullets are gone. We did QE and you know, all those bullets are gone. Operation Twist, I guess we better reload. So they started to hike interest rates. And the market did not like that. And it really helped us know, at least in my opinion, the market showed its hand on how addicted to that heroin they really are. They went into withdrawal pretty quick.
What is the heroin?
It's low interest rate printing money. It's low interest rate printing money. So here we have 10 of the most prosperous years in the market, and we're supposed to be through, and you know the economy's supposed to be doing great. But if you look at the Fed, you know you're a medical guy. If you look at the Fed stimulus as medicine to help us, Obviously, we weren't better because we were still giving lots of medicine to the economy. And when they pulled that off, and we started having twitches and withdrawals here, you saw the Fed spike. And you and I got together with you and your son. COVID, the big spike had hit, but actually the VIX had fallen below the level all the way down. The COVID had calmed down. The VIX was actually below the level that it was at the end of 2019, which tells me that the fear of the market crashing was greater over the Fed pulling their stimulus and pulling their low interest rates than it is with a global pandemic. The markets were more afraid of that. And in our previous interview, we talked about that. When the Fed doesn't directly buy equities yet, but they still print money that finds its way into those markets of real estate and equities and causes inflation in those prices. So yeah, if you're in those markets, you're more afraid that the Fed will cut off liquidity and low interest rate than you are of a global
You'd rather
global
deal with
pandemic.
Corona than that.
Yeah, you'd rather deal with Corona than that. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
That shows that detachment of fundamentals we talked about in the previous interview.
Yeah, and there seems to be, you talk about that detachment. It's like I feel like we're in some kind of a la-la land, that in all my years I can't really wrap my head around it in a way that utilizes any understanding of economics and fundamentals to what's actually happening, which is kind of disturbing. So it makes it hard as an investor. So I'm not alone, obviously. I think a lot of people feel like me, and probably a lot of people who are a lot smarter in economics than I am feel that way. So is a conclusion, at least in your mind, options now more than ever?
I don't think there's ever been a better time or more important time to learn about that particular vehicle for the reasons both of protection but also opportunistically. And it's interesting, last year they cut off school, and I never homeschooled before, so now I'm homeschooling, which for my kids, that's a nightmare, okay? When you looked at my grades and when I was growing up, that's a nightmare for them. I didn't realize how much I'd like it.
Yeah.
The relationship I've had with my kids have always been great. We play a lot of basketball together, but I didn't see that benefit coming. Some people saw a bird, and this is an opportunity. So I sat my son down, and we like to play a lot of hoop, and I said to my older son, I go, what do you want to do this year? You want to go to school? You want to stay home? Because they gave us our choice.
Right.
And he said, Dad, I want to come home. I go, what do you want to learn? He goes, let's do financial education. So the very first option trade that he made is in this environment.
Wow.
And this is a kid that I care about. This
How
is
old?
one, he's 14. And that was fun. We recorded it for posterity, and he's making his first real option trade.
Right.
And so every day, he looks at some of my accounts, and he gives me feedback on what he thinks as he's learning. What an incredible opportunity to have father-son time. But the options strategies we're using right now, they're Warren Buffett type stuff. They're not that elaborate, and a person can learn them. So I'll share with you the first one we did. We sold a put option on a stock. Now, what does that mean? To the person watching, is that just well be speaking in Japanese for some people. Well, what we did is we found a stock that we liked fundamentally. In other words, in our previous interview, we said, gee, there seems to be this detachment from fundamentals. Are there any companies out there that still have a pretty decent price and a pretty good earnings? And so we found one. And they had a little bit of debt, but as you know, if the dollar loses value, that's not as bad. So they had a little bit of debt, but they had enough cash flow to service it. And I said to my son, I go, do you think this will be around in 20 years for you? And he says, yeah, that company's pretty solid. We'll still use their goods and services. So I said, all right, what level would we like to buy it at? And we went down from price. I go, that would be a nice sale price. Use a little technical analysis, look at the chart. And, they're going to pay us about 12 to 15% per annum as a bonus, which would be about 1% a month, right? As a bonus to promise to buy something cheap. Now think about that for a minute. We're going to get paid to pick up businesses on the cheap if they fall. That is in my opinion, that's textbook Warren Buffett. In my office, I have, quotes. I don't have pictures, I have quotes, feed the brain. And one of them is from Warren Buffett. He says, I'll tell you how to become rich. Close the doors. Be fearful when others are greedy, and be greedy when others are fearful. How'd you like to be Geico right now? Collecting premium. Think about that for a minute. If you're selling insurance, Patrick, what's your manufacturing costs? What's your raw material costs? What's your assembly? What's your packaging? What's your shipping? All you are as an insurance company is someone who makes promises.
Right.
Imagine a business right now in your life where you could get paid by making promises, and not only promises, but promises you'd like to keep. So this put my son in an interesting situation. If that stock stays high, he gets paid to watch it be high. He won't get to buy it, but his cash is earning a wonderful rate of return. And you can get into the, I was pretty conservative with him as the first one. You get into the 20s on this stuff. If it goes up, he gets paid on his cash. If it stays the same, he gets paid on his cash. If it goes down, he gets paid on his cash. If it goes down far enough, he gets paid on his cash, and he gets to buy on the cheap. This is exactly how Warren Buffett bought some of his railroads. It's exactly how Warren Buffett bought some of his Coca-Cola shares. As he says, what price do I want? I will insure other people, give them the option, give them the choice to sell me that stock at a price that I like. And that is one of the most basic options trades a person can learn their first time out. It's usually the first one I share with students at the Cash Flow Academy, because think about it. My son's risk is less than if he bought stock alone.
So, but obviously it seems like, well, gosh, if that was so easy and worked so well, everybody'd be doing it. What's the potential downside? Like, in other words, how does somebody get hurt on a trade like that?
That's a perfect question, because you'd think everyone would.
Right.
It's really not, it's not a hard answer at all. Let's say my son's stock was at 35 today. If he buys the stock, what's his risk? 35.
It going down, yeah.
Yeah,
35 if it goes to zero.
What's the worst? Bankrupt is your worst case. Y'all,
Right.
whenever you talk about risk, you start with the worst case scenario and try and prove it from there. So if he buys at 35, his risk is $35. Okay, what if he promises to buy at 32? What's his risk now?
$32.
Yeah, 32 minus, what if he gets paid $100, or what if he gets paid $1 to do that? Even lower. So what I'm talking about is less risky than buying stock.
So when you buy it was a put. So
Yeah,
if
he
you
sold
buy
a
a put,
put.
somebody pays you to hold the put.
Well, they have the put.
They have the put,
right?
but they're paying you to buy it at a lower price, which
Yeah.
is insuring them against it
You nailed
going
it.
too
It's
low.
that
Yeah.
simple.
Yeah.
So if my son says, I like it at 32, great. I'll get paid to buy at 32. Now, what if it doesn't get there? Well, what if he got paid $1 on that? If your $32 in the bank was generating $1 every month, that'd be $12 at the end of the year, wouldn't it?
Right.
That's pretty good ROI on your cash. That's
Right.
going to beat inflation.
Yep.
And so this is the downside, if there is one, is that if you'd actually bought the stock at 35 and it goes to 60,
Yeah, you missed the opportunity.
you miss the opportunity. But remember what Warren Buffett says, I'm going to buy when others are fearful. And selling insurance, I mean, think about it, he owns Geico. He actually gets paid for risk transfer.
Right.
Think about that. That's scary for people. I don't want to take any risk. That's why he's rich. If you have a $150,000 car and you pay Geico, that $150,000 risk is now Geico's. But you know what? They know the numbers, and that's where the financial education comes in. They know the actuarials. They know how much to charge for that insurance, and you're going to pay some premiums.
Right.
Hey, sometimes I've bought some stocks, and I paid a higher price, to where it fell. That's happened to me multiple times. But I want the asset, and that price is good for me, and I'm going to hang on to it for a while.
Right.
So here's what's fun about this environment. Is the VIX is definitely not where it was in March. Everyone was panicked completely with COVID. The VIX is still very, very high compared to where it's been historically in these times. And so people are still nervous about the bottom falling out. They're still nervous about the Fed. And so what I do with my son is I say, what are some companies that I wish I could have got? Where's the ones that got away? Where's the one, where's that company that, I almost bought it. I thought about buying it. I was going to buy it and I didn't. Okay, go back to some of those. You say, if I ever got down there again, would you want it? And see if you can't just get paid to wait for it to get there, month after month. Get paid, wait for it to get there. And when it does, boom, now you get to buy at a low cost basis. So that's probably a little wonky for an interview for someone listening, out of the gate. But what I hope it does is people might say, gee, I might not have a perfect understanding of options for my first time with Andy, but if I studied this, this might be something I want to learn. I can get paid to buy an asset. That's a lot different than a 401k where you pay a fee to buy the asset.
Yeah.
A lot different, right?
Right.
A lot different.
And I guess another potential risk is if the stock plummeted, if you bought it at 32 and it kept going down to 28 or something, that's maybe another side of the risk.
Well, yeah, but that's a risk you were taking anyway if you bought it at 35, right?
Right.
So there's really no difference between selling a put option at a lower price and buying it today at the higher one. In fact, your risk actually is lower.
Is lower.
If
and you're making money, along
and
the
you
way.
and you got paid to buy it. So it's a very basic strategy. It's very simple. It's easy to learn, but in a way to build a position over time and to acquire stock, that's one of there's an article in the Wall Street Journal I often reference where it's not about options, it's about financial education. And it's an older article. It says Buffett scores with derivatives. This year, the insurance salesman Warren Buffett, Berkshire Hathaway, collected $2.5 billion in premium by selling insurance on stock indexes, which is exactly what we're talking about here. That's a bunch of jargon, mumbo jumbo. But if a person can find an environment where it can be made simple and they practice a little bit, they'll pick it up and do the same thing Buffett does. He just does it a little bigger than most of us.
Yeah, a couple decimal points.
Yeah.
So is it more profitable to trade options during higher volatility? Is that a better time to do it than when there's less?
Yeah, it's more profitable because there's more risk. Obviously, when I'm selling premium at a higher when the VIX is higher, that means I'm making commitments where it could really fall, have the bottom fall out. That's where your education comes into. I've always hated the advice culture on Wall Street. I've hated it because what people will do is they'll watch a program like this and they'll be craving the wrong thing. They'll be craving advice and tell me what to do. Tell me what to do. Is that ambitious or is that lazy? Someone says, Andy, should I buy gold? If I say yes, didn't learn anything. If I say no, didn't learn. Should I buy Bitcoin? Yes, didn't learn anything. No. So what education is learning to fish, not just asking for a fish.
Right.
And Wall Street gets very, very rich on the advice culture because that's what you're paying for.
Right.
A guy like Warren Buffett doesn't ever touch Wall Street. He just buys his companies, and he often sells a put, gets paid to buy them. So that's just an example of one strategy. Flip it over. If I see a stock that I have and I say, boy, if it got here, I'd really love to sell it. I don't know if it'll get there, but I'd really love to sell it. I could sell an option to sell and get paid for a promise to sell and may never get there. If it does, great.
Which is called a call.
Exactly right.
So walk us through that. So in the same scenario where you have a $35 stock, instead of doing a put at 32.
I'd sell it at 40. Give me a buck, I'll sell it at 40, right?
So walk through that, just like kind of slowly. So okay, so now I'm going to say I'll buy it so you're committing to sell it at 40.
Yeah, let me use my son as an example.
Okay.
So we've sold this put, and it will expire in about 2 weeks. And one or two things will have happened. A, it will have gone down far enough that now he has an asset. Now he's got out of cash and he's got 100 shares of this stock. B, it didn't go down for him and he collects the premium. So either way, my son's going to be pretty happy, isn't he?
Right.
He's going to say, yeah, finally got my stock. Maybe buys it a little bit higher than it is, but he's happy to have it. Well, the moment he owns that stock, just as you can get paid to make promises to buy stocks that you want, you can also make promises to sell stocks you want. And so the moment that happens, we'll turn right around and one of the games I play with him is, he's getting big. I'm not going to be able to do this too much longer. I'm 6'8", and he's about 6'1" now.
Wow.
And so I'll hold the basketball in front of him, and I'll play this game, where he can't, where he can't get it. And that's a lot of what we learn how to do using some technical analysis and a couple of fancy standard deviations. But I basically will say, hey, you wanna buy my stock? You wanna buy my stock? And I'll just put it just to where if they get it, great. I sold at a huge profit. And if they don't, next month maybe. So you can collect premium, and this is called time decay. Think of what a rental, to make this simple, think of what a rental agreement is. Well, you have the choice to stay in my house. If you want to live in your mom's house, that's fine, but you've got mine if you want to live in it.
Right.
And it's good for a month. Now, the price of the home could go up and down, but I'm going to collect rent because you have the choice to live in my house. Well, this is just the same. Look, I have some stock. Stock's not yours, but I'll give you the chance to buy it if it goes high enough. And these are not, this is not Tesla. This is not buying Tesla and then the next day you're rich. It's not buying Amazon and all of a sudden it gaps up. The greed that people have of wanting a lot for little can overwhelm and distract them from what we call compounding. And one of the most popular, and this is so conservative, this little idea of selling a call, saying, hey, I'll sell it if the price gets high enough that you entice me to sell. You can do that in an IRA. So this is not over leveraging. This is not going crazy. You have cash to cover the promises that you make to buy things, and you have stock to cover the promises you make to sell things. And that's probably the two most basic cash flow strategies. And let's say it pumps up your your percent you get a little bit. Well, anyone that knows about compounding, get another percent here, another percent there. By the time you're 89 and you're looking at Berkshire Hathaway, you're pretty happy. You're pretty happy.
So what would you say the timeline is for a novice who now is listening to this saying, the general themes I can kind of track here. It kind of makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I think this is a better thing for me than trying to just buy and sell equities outright. I like the idea of options or choices, as you like to put them. And I want to enter this arena, but I'm sure there's, I don't even know what I don't know yet.
Sure.
What's the first step for somebody like that? Should they paper trade? Should they, what would they do?
I'd do it just like I did my own boy. He's a bright kid. I mean, despite his father, he's a pretty bright kid. And we started, homeschool, and about a month in, we did just what you said. We practiced and paper trade an account for a month or two. And having a mentor is important, having someone to watch what you do, and then someday you're ready to make that first little trade. It isn't like you go from paper trading to full scale, all your money's in. It's a gradual thing. Oh, mostly paper, a couple real. Maybe 3 real. It's a gradual thing. But for most people, it's something they can pick up. Even if a person says, this is the mistake a person makes, is at first blush, school does this to us, is at first blush they didn't get it, they think it's not for them. That was the big problem I had in school. I went into my chemistry class, and because I didn't understand it the first day, I sold myself short. I said, well, that's just too hard for me. But if a person gets the right teacher, and if a person puts in just a few minutes in their education, it can be actually fun to learn something that they thought was complex.
Right.
And it's like my dad always says, it's awfully simple when you know it's simply awful when you don't. And so I would say, it's a very short amount of time for the average person. My son, of course I'm a dad, so I'm way proud of what he's done, but he's coming along really, really well. And if he can do it, I think most people could learn it.
Is there a profile of a certain type of person or persons that should not do options? Like it's not the right thing for them?
Yeah, the worst personality you could have to trade options is mine.
Well, that doesn't make any sense. This is what you do.
It is the worst one. As I look back, there's 2 things that I think I've found. If I look at my mistakes, either one was an education gap where there was something I should have learned. I was, doing things that I didn't understand. But another one is temperament. I'm sure that in both our lives we could list things that we weren't ignorant. We knew what we should have done,
Right.
but the devil made us do it.
Right, yeah.
And so I don't think there's a specific personality that would forbade a person from doing anything they wanted to do, right? If a person wanted to get into sales and they really wanted to, you can morph. That's what personal development is. I would hate someone to put me in a box, say, Andy, you're kind of gregarious and you're out of control. You're too emotional to trade options. Baloney. I can learn to temper those things. Someone says, oh, you're born without a personality. You'll never be a salesman. Baloney. I believe that with personal development, that a person can do darn near anything they want to do in this life. That's just my opinion. And if you're humble and you're a student, you're willing to make some mistakes, you're going to be just fine. You're going to be okay.
And your humility and self-deprecation, I think, might be overselling this for some people. I think you might be a little smarter than you let on to, and you've earned your stripes here,
Well,
no doubt.
You ask my wife, she'll verify everything I've said. So.
Yeah, that's maybe not the first person I'd go to. But anyway, I think it's fascinating. I mean, people are lost right now because I really feel like we've entered like the twilight zone to a large degree. It's, you said we got polarized politics, we've got states that are burning, we've got fear indexes that are riding kind of high. We've got a market that maybe in some respects doesn't make sense. How's the market holding all the way up here when all these other things are going on? Yet it is. Yeah. And in the end, it's like, what do I do? It's a little paralyzing. But the idea of options, to me, seems like, wow, this is a place that if you can get in and learn some things about it and sort of master it and incrementally increase your trading in it, that's maybe a place that no matter what all these other variables are, you can still work in that marketplace.
The gift I would offer is one of serenity and calmness. I would invite people to say, think about your car right now. Did you freak out last night about whether you're going to get in a wreck? No, you got insurance, right? Yeah. Oh, am I freaked out that my home might burn down in California? Might be. Oh, but I have insurance, thank heaven. And in a time where you look at your 401k or you look at your investments, you think, wow, where could all this go? To be able to spend a very small amount of money and to arrange your portfolio in such a way that you know an outcome, up, down, or sideways. You're locked in with insurance with just a little money to do that. You get to sleep a little easier. You get to concentrate on your family. You get to concentrate on your world. Let these politicians do what they want to do. They're always going to be fine. Let the world go along its merry way. If I have insurance and I have options and I have choices, that makes me feel good inside, that I have the choice to do X, Y, and Z. So I would say the person that would that this would find appealing, number one, would I like a little bit more calmness and a little bit more serenity in that part of my investing portfolio? And number two, would I be curious to actually get an income, a cash flow based on time movement, maybe even less than, or maybe more so than stock movement? That's worth investigating. And so, like you say, is now a good time to do this? Yeah, it's a good time.
It seems like a really good time.
It
As
is.
always, I so much appreciate you coming and sharing all this and
It's so awesome.
giving us the real life analogies that kind of bring it all to visibility, at least for me. You're an awesome teacher, so thank you so much for doing that.
Thank you so much for having me. I hope we get to do it again sometime soon.
I'm sure we will. Thanks. Every time I talk to Andy Tanner, I learn something that impacts me, that affects my judgment, affects my outcomes, and leads me to higher ground. I was really, really excited to be able to share this with you. Andy always shows up and delivers in a big way. He holds nothing back. And thank you for taking this time to observe this information, to take it in, because I think it could change your life. Pretty much everyone knows about the Motley Fool, and one of the co-founders of the Motley Fool is David Gardner. David is bright, he's energized, he's been at this stuff for a while, and you would think that it just started yesterday with the level of energy that he brings to the table. When we showed up with our production crew to Motley Fool headquarters, I have to tell you, I was pleasantly surprised, maybe even somewhat shocked, how the culture and the environment of what they do there is pervasive. You might see like the ads, you might see interviews of David Gardner, you might see things that are in the media, but you wonder behind the scenes, what does it look like when you show up to work there? Well, I have to tell you, what you see in their brand in the marketplace is what's going on at the headquarters of the Motley Fool. And also their way of looking at the market and picking stocks, I believe that it's timeless, that these principles are ongoing no matter what's going on in the world. You can benefit from them, you can understand the markets better, and this is why they have decades of success in their company, because they are not something that is a fad. Their way of approaching the markets is something that lasts for eternity. So tune into this, listen to it, understand it, and you're going to walk away with some gold nuggets. Enjoy my interview with David Gardner. David, thank you so much for inviting us into your home, or your home office, I should say, but it feels very friendly and homey here. Looking
Kind
forward.
of you to say, Patrick. Thank you for suffering fools gladly. You have to really. We're like fools all the time. When actually anybody comes in from the outside world, hangs out with us, they're always raising the caliber here because you're surrounded by a lot of foolishness. So thank you for suffering fools gladly.
It doesn't feel like suffering, but nonetheless, I'm enjoying my experience already. And I just so much I want to talk to you about. I'm like, oh, let's wait till we turn on the cameras to have this conversation. Your story is a great entrepreneurial story. So could you kind of give us the background? Like, how did this whole thing emerge?
Sure. Well, we really just started the Motley Fool as a newsletter for our parents' friends. They were the only ones willing to pay us $48 a year for our advice, and I think they just kind of felt sorry for us. And I had quit my one job that I'd had up until the Motley Fool. I was writing for Louis Rukeyser, who was the longtime host of Wall Street Week on PBS. He had a newsletter, a financial newsletter, published here in Alexandria, Virginia, where we're talking today. And it wasn't a good job, as it turns out. I didn't really get to work with Lou, but what I was doing is I was writing, and I was able to write about things that I thought would be helpful for people in the financial world. So I would write about discount brokers, which 25 years ago was a newer thing, right? The idea that you could make some of the decisions yourself and actually just buy stocks directly for a much lower price through a discount broker. So I'd write that up, and then it would come back edited, and only half of it was what I'd written, and any color or personality was stripped out of it, and the first half was just a dry recitation of what I'd already said, and the second half were all the reasons you wouldn't want to use a discount broker. And from one month to the next, whether it was Quicken software or discount brokers, I kept like not being able to advocate for something and always without any color. And so I was out of that job. And so we had to start a newsletter for our parents' friends. But Patrick, from the get-go, we've always loved the stock market. We had a dad who taught us about the stock market. And we started to realize our parents' friends don't know that much about the stock market. And so we thought we had a voice. And by picking a foolish name, a business grew out of that.
How did the name get picked?
So I picked the name. It was from Act 2, Scene 7 of As You Like It. That's Shakespeare's probably greatest single scene about fools and foolishness. You can read all of Shakespeare, which I haven't quite, and I don't think you're going to find a better scene, Act 2, Scene 7 of As You Like It, but it's a nondescript quote, a fool, I see a fool of the forest, a motley fool. There are some other great lines in that scene, like invest me in my motley. There are a lot of good puns for us and what we're doing, but it kind of celebrates a foolish life, which is you're not really with Wall Street.
Right.
You're out, you're in the rural area, you're enjoying the forests, and you come across people who don't take themselves so seriously. And so I thought that's a great viewpoint to be coming from, because we are going to be talking about Wall Street and what we're doing, but we want to make it clear we're not that. We're more Main Street, not Wall Street. And so I love the character of the fool. We're going to screw up a lot. I've made a lot of bad stock picks in my life, so I can at least say ahead of time, hey, at least I told you I was a fool, right? I mean, like, we know, please, we take our work seriously, but we don't take ourselves too seriously. And so the name just, it fit.
Yeah.
I'm so glad we picked it. It's a crazy thing to take into the financial world.
Well, yeah, I was going to say it's really a crazy thing to bring into the financial world. The opposite of the newsletter you were originally writing for, right? Where everything had to be sterile and clean and serious.
That's right.
So the idea was breeding credibility, but you're basically saying, hey, we're being more transparent about the fact that this is not such a serious game as insofar as you're not Wall Street. You're literally on the other side of that wall, metaphorically speaking.
Yeah.
And you can have some fun with this.
Yes. And there's also a second aspect to it, which helps. And that is that once you start to get into understanding what fools are about, you start to realize they were the only ones who could tell the king or queen the truth back in the Elizabethan courts and back through Renaissance history, right? The fool was there. He or she had license to be a truth teller at court when everybody else couldn't. And how did he or she survive? Well, through humor.
Yeah.
And so there's one part of our brand and our name which is kind of like Dummy's Guide, like Dummy's Guide to Investing kind of thing. And that's what we try to do with the Motley Fool. We try to make it, we speak the lingua franca, use English, plain English, and talk to people just like ourselves and try to help them understand money. But the other part of it is that we really do try to tell the truth and make people smarter and use humor. And of course, when you're going to take the name The Motley Fool and enter the financial world where people say a fool and his money are soon parted, you better have something special, and you better feel really motivated to own and earn that name over time.
Well, and the brand purity is here after all these years, especially because I'm walking around the offices and as I'm looking how the office is set up, what the environment is around you, how the employees interact either with me or I see them interact with each other. That general vibe is all there. I mean, there's certainly a sense of purpose and intelligence, no doubt about it, but there's this kind of just, we're having fun vibe going on.
Yeah, and it's something that you can't just make happen overnight. I mean, you really have to, any culture is built, whether we're talking about civilizations of the last hundreds of years, or we're talking about a corporate culture, or at a university. A lot of us can look back to our colleges and remember something unique that felt cultural. But I think, especially here at The Fool, we've just kind of hired, who you hire, who you fire, who you promote, the cliche runs. That says a lot about your culture. That is your culture. Right. So we started by just hiring our friends from college. They're the only ones we could afford to hire initially. We couldn't take out wanted ads in the Washington Post, which is how you hired 25 years ago. These days, we wouldn't have been able to afford a big LinkedIn package. So we just started hiring our friends. And if you're going to do that, then you're going to create a culture probably by necessity, which is fun.
Right.
Because you're not going to say things like you need to be here at 9 o'clock and you have to stay till 5, or we're going to count your vacation days, or all those things the other corporations do. When we started, we would never have done that to our college friends. And so we've just kind of kept that vibe going.
You guys have won some awards around being one of the best companies to work for, haven't you?
We have. And I credit my brother, number one. He's our CEO. And Tom has always had, Tom was a great summer camp counselor. He's like one of those guys that if you went to a summer camp, we went to one in New England, you'd love to have him be your counselor. And that love of kind of a collegial atmosphere, whether it's summer camp or college, that feel, he's always done just a great job kind of projecting that. And then I guess just, from our name that we chose intentionally, but then right down through to the business of what we do every day, Patrick, which is that we try to help the world invest better. It's a world that doesn't understand investing. The word invest is largely misunderstood. We can talk about that maybe a little bit later, but so much of our work is almost try to peel back the layers of complexity that people have added to money that have caused them not to see the truth or what they should be doing. And so a lot of our job is just to kind of get people right back in touch with, hey, you're a human, I'm a human, we can figure this thing out, especially using the internet together, we can become better at money together. So I think I'm starting to rant or left your actual question, but it's because I love talking about our purpose and what we do.
You didn't leave it at all, and it actually leads to another question, which is, so you start with a newsletter, and and I think you said what the intent is having your parents' friends kind of understand this a little bit better, right? And have some fun around it.
That's true.
What were the other milestones in the journey that started to build out this very large organization?
Yeah. So I think the first one I'll identify is just that we did an April Fool's joke because we were the Motley Fool, and we did it online, which back then was like a new thing. These days, every corporation has its April Fool's joke annually every year. It's like not even a fun day anymore because everybody's making the. But back then, nobody was doing it, and the internet, well, really, the internet didn't exist. The World Wide Web, that phrase wasn't being used back in AOL in 1993-4. And so we played a joke hyping a penny stock that didn't exist. We started to see people are pumping and dumping, and people are using this medium to cause others to buy bad penny stocks. And they're literally selling their own shares to the people they're getting to buy the stock and then leaving them to dry with these penny stocks. So we basically parodied that and got the attention of the Wall Street Journal and Forbes magazine, each of which wrote a little article on what the Motley Fool had done on Prodigy, which I know we're about the same age. So you remember back in the day, Prodigy?
Sure. Yeah.
Not a big brand anymore. AOL's not as big a brand anymore, but back in those days, they were big dogs. And so that was number one, is that we got the attention of the press for what we were doing online, having fun with the medium, and trying to make a really important financial point, which is don't buy penny stocks and don't get involved in others pump and dump schemes.
Right.
AOL said, hey, you guys should open up the Motley Fool on AOL. That's number two. That was August 4th of 1994. So it's 24 years later now, but we started the newsletter 1 year before, so the Motley Fool is celebrating its 25th anniversary this year. But that was number two, debuting online, keyword fool.
Right.
Getting up on the AOL main screen back in the day, that was really big. We had lots of people clicking through, what is this jester? Who are these people? And so we had a lot of attention. And then we had a great first month or so, and the New Yorker wrote us up in the Talk of the Town section and said there's this cool new thing on AOL called the Motley Fool. Right. And that triggered calls from Simon & Schuster, from literary agents, hey, there's a book here. And all of a sudden, we started realizing, two bros, we had money to hire a third person and a fourth, and we could become a company. So we very much did not start as a company. We were not entrepreneurs. We didn't think of it that way. But all of a sudden, we realized this is going to become something.
So now this starts to build and builds momentum. And at that point, it was information-based for the most part, right? Just giving out advice as you saw it. There was no product or service that you were selling other than that.
In retrospect, I wish we'd had a product. You're right.
Yeah.
We wrote our first book, Simon & Schuster, and we basically just said, hey, go to keyword fool on AOL.
Yeah.
Now, it was kind of a product in that back in those days we paid, you remember this? Connect fees, remember? $4 an hour?
Yes.
So if you came to the Motley Fool keyword fool on AOL, we'd get 10% of that. So if you're paying AOL $3.50 an hour, we were getting 35 cents if you spent an hour. So our first book, which tried to help America think smarter about the stock market, ultimately didn't have any product or anything that we could really sell other than, hey, go to our site. All of a sudden, 2 years later, AOL goes free.
Right.
Going to our site isn't even, now we're just trying to get money on ads, which
Right.
is how the Motley Fool transitioned its business during a golden age for AOL where all of a sudden it got cheap to get online, finally. But we ended up in really bad trouble after 2001, which was such a horrible year for our nation, for the stock market, which closed a few days. Some buildings fell. It was just a horrible year. So we had a lot of layoffs, and we had to shift our business model. And we went from an ad-free, ad-supported site to a subscription-based business, which is how we'd started 7 years before for our parents' friends. And
Interesting.
now, 25 years later, that's how we butter our bread. We're a subscription business.
I'm reading from your energy and enthusiasm. This is still as fun today or more fun than it ever has been after 25 years?
It is more fun today than it ever has been. I mean, there are pleasures that I'll never get back. For example, the very first time the Wall Street Journal ever printed the phrase "the Motley Fool" seriously, I mean, I was on the floor. I was to think that we actually, it was a newsletter for our parents' friends, people, and we called it the Motley Fool. And look, they've just legitimized this. It's the Motley Fool. It says that, so I can never get that back, right? Other experiences like that. Having supper with Barbra Streisand as she's talking about how she loves the Motley Fool and is day trading eBay, which is an earlier stage of Barbra Streisand existing. Like just experiences that I could never have imagined just a year or two before that, when I was just operating from a small apartment in Charlottesville, Virginia, as my wife went through grad school. I couldn't believe what had happened. So I love all that. We were on the cover of Fortune magazine. When I go back to the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, which is where I graduated university, and I say, if I could see a video of myself right now with a fool cap on giving a talk to the business school when I was an undergrad studying English, I'd be like, what has happened to me that I'm talking about stocks with a jester cap on from the business school? So I can never get those moments back. But the truth is that we're operating at just a larger base today and reaching more people, and now globally, we just have more capabilities, more possibilities, and that's what's most fun. So I can say, I sure hope Tom's having more fun than he ever has before. I am. I think many of our employees are. I'll never speak for anybody but myself, but I'm having a lot of fun, and I think our members are too. And when the stock market's as strong as it has been, you can imagine that that's going to be fun too for our business, always will be.
Sure. I noticed many of the conference rooms around here have people's names on it. Right now we're in the Mackey room for John Mackey, who, the Whole Foods CEO and co-founder. I see Bezos across the way here. What's the theme here?
So we definitely love entrepreneurs. There are no great stocks. There are no great stock picks without great entrepreneurs.
Right.
So while we're very stock market focused, the truth is we're just very business focused. So I want to make it really clear that we deeply admire and are grateful for people like Jeff Bezos. I'm glad that I got to live on the earth at the time that Jeff did. Not only did we pick the stock at $3 a share, and now it's like 2,000, so it's up 600 times in value, so it's been our best stock pick ever. So not only do we appreciate that, but apart from any bragging, what an incredible company Amazon is. I mean, how much value is it add just for me as a consumer, maybe you too.
Yes.
And then right next to it, Rowling, J.K. Rowling. What an incredible entrepreneur. I mean, the author of the Harry Potter
You
books.
just made my daughter very happy, incidentally.
And you know what I love about both Rowling and Bezos? Think about the smiles they brought to how many lives in totally different ways, and yet both of them very business-minded. J.K. Rowling, I think the highest net worth, except for maybe Queen Elizabeth, female in the UK today, and think about where she came from. In fact, both Bezos and Rowling didn't come from wealth.
Right.
And so that's also a great story, and always been true, will be true every generation about business, is that entrepreneurs rise from anywhere.
Yep, and it's a story of wealth creation, right? And that's what I think people have to understand, is that wealth is created through efforts, through purpose, through these types of productive activities. It's value creation.
That's exactly right. In fact, the way I've heard it before, and Patrick, I bet you know this because it sounds very familiar, is poverty doesn't need to be explained.
Right.
Because poverty is how everything started.
Right.
We arose from the swamps. We didn't even have clothes. Poverty doesn't need to be explained. Maybe in some contexts it does.
Yeah.
Really what needs to be explained is our wealth, our
Yeah.
prosperity. Where did that come from? And how do we get more of that? How do we generate more of that for everybody globally?
So aside from these conference rooms, I'm seeing this open area work environment here that's fascinating, to say the least. Looks like fun. I want to go out and play.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, Patrick, because in some ways, both my brother, our CEO, Tom Gardner, and his brother, Dave Gardner, have sometimes wondered, is this the most productivity that we could have, this kind of approach? Because it is fun. It's very social. There's a lot of glass,
Yeah.
a lot of transparency, which is true of the Motley Fool's advice and our brand and how we've always built our company. But it also means sometimes it's almost too fun. So some of our employees have to sequester themselves sometimes in quiet spaces or dark places to actually get work done here at Fool HQ. I don't come in every day of the week now these days at the Fool, but when I do, I'm here for meetings. I stack my meetings wall to wall across the day. If I actually needed to be picking my stocks or do other things, I might need to find some quiet spaces outside of Fool HQ. Anyway, it is a lot of fun and we love it.
Now, you earlier alluded to saying people don't understand what the term invest means. So can we circle back to that and tell me what you mean by that statement?
Yeah, so the word invest comes from the Latin investere. And I never did take Latin, but I do love etymologies. I do love seeing where our language comes from. So the word investere in Latin means to put on the clothes of, to wear the clothes of. So a word like priestly vestments, that's from the same root investere. So to wear the clothes of. And I love that visual for trying to teach others truly how to invest. Because I think it's a lot closer. We're about to hit the NFL football time of year. So if you're a fan, you go to the games, people are wearing the jerseys of the teams, or hockey. Happens especially in hockey and football. It seems not as much baseball. Baseball. Anyway, people are wearing the clothes. And that's the way we think you should be with your money when you're investing in great companies.
Right.
You should love what the company does. You should see something of yourself in it. You should be patient. When your team has a losing streak, you shouldn't sell. And you shouldn't be right away thinking, now that I've bought this stock, when do I sell?
Right.
You should basically be making a lifetime of it as a fan of capitalism and of the companies that you're invested in. So that's where the word invest comes from, to put on the clothes of. And we live in a world where the average mutual fund today turns over 70 to 100% of itself over the course of a year. So the average managed mutual fund today, whatever the managers start with January 1st, those stocks are typically gone by the end of that same year. And while that might work for the institutions, although I don't think it's a great approach for institutions, it certainly shouldn't be done by individuals. We have an incredible advantage by showing patience and by putting on those clothes.
Well, it's interesting because the context of that word is used that way. Like, I'm invested in my team, the New York Giants.
You're right.
And that's why you would, because you're emotionally invested, and why? Because there's something about that reflects. You said this, so I'm just reiterating. But there's something about that you see there that reflects something in yourself that you connect to, that you want to be bonded with. So does that translate into more, like you're saying, like a long-term view when you're investing or buying stock, that you don't want to just turn things over, but what you advise people as a part of your investment philosophy is to buy and hold or be invested in it for the long haul. How do you see that?
That's right. I see that as the greatest advantage that you and I have as individuals, and it's more powerful than the institutions. Institutions really have to trade in and out, in part because they have a lot of people who are putting money in the fund and then need to pull it out to buy a house or whatever. So institutions themselves are jumping in and out, partly driven by individuals. But you and I, with our own portfolios, our 401k plans, there's no compulsion to do that. We should be investing toward retirement or toward goals that should be long-term goals. And so the greatest friend to us is the power of compounded returns. But I mean, it's just such an incredibly, the math is so beautiful. The stock market on average returns about 10% annualized. I don't know of anything else that does that. I mean, that is literally every year it goes up another 10%. Now, you and I both know it's not literally every year. Some years it drops 28%, and other years it goes up 42%. But when you take it on average over decades or now century plus, it's 10% a year. And so if you just let that 10% keep compounding, you know that you start to double your money every 7 years. And that's just if you're doing what the stock market on average does. Now, every day at the Motley Fool, I and my fellow fools work to beat the market averages. I'm happy to say we have a record of doing that. So we can actually double our money faster than that. But there's nothing like that. So the earlier anybody watching this show finds out about that in life, as early as possible, they get on that train, the compounding train, that 10% annualized, wind at your back. And it's so powerful 10, 20, 50 years later. That's why it's a delight whenever I can talk to a teenager. And when I'm talking to a 52-year-old like myself, I still feel great. Like, I hope we got another 50 years, so let's stay invested. But the earlier we can get them through all the work that we're doing together, the better for them.
So it's obvious for the younger person saying, hey, you know, there's a lot of road in front of you and it'd be good to take advantage of this now. But let's say you're the 50-something, as you characterize it, professional. You've made a good living, you know, over time, but you've never understood investment, never understood, you know, you only understood how to create, you know, revenue based on the business that you're in. What advice would you have for them? Say, I'm in my 50s now. How do I jump into this?
Yeah, so number one, a lot of what you learn from your professional life can and should be applied to your investing life. And one of the sad things for me, since there's such a lack of financial literacy and understanding in our country, and our country is well ahead of much of the rest of the world.
Sure.
So there's just mass ignorance about how to make your money work for you. But once you realize that the lessons you learn as a professional can be applied, like what companies do you admire? Great, let's buy those companies in our portfolios. Let's be numerical. We have to be that in our business. Well, did you know that whole 10% thing I was talking about earlier? Let's do some math on a spreadsheet together and put together a plan. And so number one, you have more than you think, which was the title of our second book. All those lessons and viewpoints you have, both as a professional and a consumer.
Right.
And the people around you. Some of my best stocks come from my kids, my wife, my friends, my fellow fools. I don't have to be a genius and find every good company out there. I can definitely listen and socialize it, right? So number one. Then number two, we're all living longer these days. I mean, a lot of people have the biggest fear, not that they didn't save, but that they're going to live so long that they're going to outlive and outstrip their savings because of the increase in longevity. Worldwide, longevity for humans is up 1/3 since 1950. So basically the last 80 years, we're all living 1/3 longer than they did just a generation or two ago. So as a fellow early 50s person, if I'm speaking to somebody like me, because I'm 52, I'd say you should be thinking about 40 years ahead. Does that sound like a long amount of time? To me, that sounds like the long term. That sounds like a good, healthy amount of time. So let's get invested now. Let's take our savings right away and get it in the market. And we can talk some about the market and its wiles. But let's not worry about what the market's going to do tomorrow. Let's not worry about people telling you it's going to crash next year, those kinds of things. Think about being an investor for the rest of your life, 40 plus years, and let's start doing it the real way, the way that works.
So let's talk about the market. So what comments did you have in your mind when you were saying, we can talk about the market? What do you want to say about it?
So a couple of rules of thumb everybody should know. We've already covered one. Stock market rises on average 10% a year. It's very hard to find anything that's going to do that. Real estate, depending on where we are, might do something like that, but it's illiquid. You can't turn around and sell that property, and sometimes you have to maintain or be a landlord. That's a lot of effort relative to just a stock portfolio. Bonds, 5, 6, 7% historically. CDs 1, 2% historically. I mean, so the state lottery minus 50%. I have to put a quick slam into the state lottery because it's really bad advice that we're giving our fellow Americans every day. Things like you got to play to win.
Right.
You could be next. It's really sad. Every dollar that anybody spends on a lottery ticket, 50 cents is skimmed right off the top as a tax, and you're left with an incredibly, it's a bear market every day in state lotteries. So people lack an understanding of these numbers, and so I just like to make sure we understand kind of the range of possibilities. There's minus 50% daily, right up to how about 10% annually over time. So another rule of thumb, 2 years out of every 3, the stock market rises. 1 year out of every 3, the stock market drops. So if you're going to hold, as I do for decades, that means a third of the time you're going to feel bad. You're going to look silly. As a professional picking stocks that people follow my advice, I look like an idiot all the time. A lot of the stocks that I picked haven't worked out. And so you just have to be at peace with that and recognize you need to lose to win.
So let's say I'm a subscriber of yours, and maybe a new subscriber. What's the best way for me to engage so that I can maximize the benefit I get from your service?
So Motley Fool Stock Advisor is our starter service. That's the vast majority of our members are subscribed to Motley Fool Stock Advisor. And what we're doing there is my brother and I are each picking a stock a month. And so we're thinking about the next 3+ years. So if you were to join this month, you're going to see my latest, freshest, newest favorite pick,
All right.
my brother Tom's. You'll be able to look up and down and see all stocks we've ever picked since we launched in March of 2002. So you can see our records. You're going to see we've beaten the market very substantially in a world where it's often assumed or taught that you can't beat the stock market. It would just be luck.
Right.
For some reason, I've happened into the one professional discipline where everybody thinks that it would just be luck to be better than average. People don't think that about NBA players. They don't think that about doctors or lawyers. But for some reason, picking stocks, well, that would just be you're coming against monkeys and you have no shot throwing darts against the wall, right? So I don't believe that. I've never believed that. I think that you are rewarded. You definitely can beat the market. We've demonstrated that. So you'd see that in Stock Advisor. And then we would want you to get your feet wet. We'd suggest that you buy one or both of those stocks. And then next month, when we come out with our next picks, we'd suggest you do it again and make a regular habit of saving every 2 weeks, investing every month. And I'd hope that you could go from 0 stocks, if that's where you were, to 15 stocks.
Right.
As quickly as possible so that you have a nice base, a portfolio. And from there, you could keep adding or just add to those 15. You could add more. There's a lot of ways to play it. But what you're doing there are 2 things. You are investing regularly.
Right.
You're not sweating the market or worried or waiting because you hear it might crash. Every single month, you're dollar cost averaging into our picks. And number 2, you're going to start experiencing the positive vibe of success. Because, again, 10% on average is the gain made by this thing year in and year out. In 2 years, every 3, you're winning, and it beats everything else, especially over time. So I think you're going to start feeling those positive vibes, and you're going to want to save more at that point. You're going to start saying, honey, let's save even more because look. And in fact, you'll be rewarded for that over time.
So structurally, it'd be a matter of saying, okay, so I would subscribe. I'd set up some kind of a trading account.
Yes. Yeah, you would definitely want to open up a brokerage account, which these days is very easy to do online.
Sure.
There are things like Schwab and E-Trade, and you see them all advertising, and they're all pretty good.
Yep.
But yes, you definitely need to have an account, and that's not much more than when you opened up a bank account as a high school kid. You probably wrote a check to deposit that first amount of money.
Right.
You do the same thing with a brokerage account. Of course, a lot of people have 401k accounts and retirement plans, IRAs, where they can invest sometimes stocks directly there.
Sure.
So a lot of people use that.
And I think a part of this, which is maybe the psychological part, this human psychodynamic is saying, well, once you have a structure, then you start to have the discipline to fund, as a process, saying, hey, we have a certain amount of income coming in, and we're going to allocate. And
That's right.
And doing it with you, because just hearing you talk about it being in the glow of what this environment is here, it seems like fun as compared to drudgery. And I think that's a part a lot of people say this is too abstract and mystical for me, and it seems very boring. I don't want to get involved. But somehow you guys keep people engaged through humor and through fun.
Well, I appreciate that, and because I don't want us to take too much credit for it. I think it is among the most fun and positive things that you can do, whether or not the Motley Fool ever told you to do that or not.
Right.
Right. The act of becoming a part owner of companies that you admire, companies whose products you love. A lot of people love Apple. It's been a pretty good stock over the last 10 or 20 years, right?
Yeah.
It's now the largest public company in the world.
The first $1 trillion company.
That's right,
Value,
and
yeah.
it's been tremendously successful. And a lot of people, the reason it's so successful is because they love the product. And
Right.
so for anybody who ever bought an iPhone, I'd say, did you think about also spending that same $200, saving additionally, buying some Apple stock? Because
Right.
that iPhone's going to depreciate, and you're going to have to buy the next one. But at Apple stock, that appreciates. So to go away from the stock market briefly, a lot of people buy that first car,
Right.
and they don't realize that's going to be a depreciating asset. It's maybe not the best way to spend your money. If instead you'd spent that money with a $30,000 stock purchase, and you play that forward 10, 15 years, you start to see the power of not buying cars new that often. So I think it should be fun. I think it is fun. I love the companies I'm invested in. I'm fascinated by Intuitive Surgical, which is bringing surgical robots and improving outcomes for people, or Netflix, which is the way I've spent a lot of hours. Right? These are companies I love. So I think this should be by nature fun. And maybe a lot of people like fantasy football. I like fantasy stock ball. I think that we should have the same fun that people have with watching sports with our stocks.
And it's interesting. It's so often over the years, my mother had when we were having to have traffic directed to go into a Whole Foods, when it first came out in our town, she's like, "You ought to go buy that stock, Home Depot. You ought to buy it," because she's just these crowds. And back then, of course, I was smarter. I went and I looked and I said, "Well, it looks like all the growth is priced in already." Blah blah blah. That's when Whole Foods was up like 20 or something, And so my mom actually was a much better stock picker than I was.
I appreciate that.
But I think that's the point. Is what you're saying is that if you're a consumer of something that you have a passion about, that's probably a good stock to be in. Given some other considerations, but that's one way to look at it.
Absolutely. In fact, that's the truest way of looking at it. The reason that the stock market exists is so that people like you and me can take part ownership in the companies themselves. They take in our money and it allows them to grow their business,
Right.
but we become part owners. And so it's amazing that every day you have access to thousands of companies that you and I could right now become a part owner of. And then the only question is, A, do I have the money? Am I saving? Am I saving 10% of my salary every 2 weeks? I hope so.
Yep.
And then B, okay, which one out of this kid in a candy store, farmer's market here, which booth do we want to go up to? We're not going to be buying fruits and vegetables. We're actually going to be buying Hasbro
Right.
or Disney
Right.
or Under Armour. And why would we buy this one over that one? And which is going to be the best one? And if you're a gamer and I'm a gamer, I'm not even an investor. I'm really just a gamer who happens to invest. If you're a gamer, this is like the greatest game of all, is asking, what's going to beat the market? What's going to be the best? What's going to be the next Apple? That's one thing we do every day at The Motley Fool. And over the last 25 years, we've gotten it right some of the times, and it's tremendously fun when you do.
So what are conversations like around here? Because I'm sure you have a team of people that are looking at different things, and you probably get together and say, okay, let's have a conversation. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And people kind of share their passions or their ideas as far as what stocks. What's your process like?
Yeah, well, and that is true of what happens here at Fool HQ, especially among our analysts. That's their professional calling.
Right.
But I mean, with member events and people on our website and the community that we've grown at Fool.com over the years, I mean, we basically love those conversations. It's kind of like that if you do a fantasy football draft,
Yep.
except we're talking about stocks. And the good news is, while it's fun to win your draft NFL league,
Right.
when you win with your stock portfolio, that really causes your life to change in wonderful ways. Like you can retire early off this, harder to do off that, right? So we recognize the importance of these decisions, and we try to make sure that everybody, whether they just started as a receptionist here at the Motley Fool, and you'd think, well, that person maybe wouldn't even care about stocks. No,
Right.
Everybody, we want to make sure that they love what we do. Now, not everybody's going to care about the stock market as much as my brother and I do.
Right.
But that feeling of, well, the purpose of our company is to help the world invest better, so darn it, we should start with our employees. In fact, we give each of our employees a stipend to begin investing, regardless of what their role is. But yeah, I think that shows like Silicon Valley, I mean, just think about how business is more and more popular. The Office, right? Like these are entering our narrative, our stories as storytellers. Like these things that were kludgy stock market conversations 30 years ago. So I think being interested in where the world's headed, and it's being shaped by for-profit corporations globally, in my opinion, most strongly of all, you're talking about the future as much as you are some wonky thing like the stock market.
Right, and it seems to me like you're giving people a new lens to look through when they're viewing the market, like just to have a different experience in what they're seeing. What do you see moving forward as far as Motley Fool and what impact it might have on the world, let's say in the next 10 years? What do you want to see happen?
Well, I would love for everybody to be invested. And for that to happen, everybody needs to save. And we've tried various things over the course of time at Fool.com, our book, You Have More Than You Think. We've written to the people who don't have money yet and who can invest in the stock market, shouldn't. They have credit card debt, got to get rid of that. A lot of student debt these days. We've tried to speak to these and help people there. But the future that I hope that we're helping create is one where everyone's a saver, because everyone truly can be. And then they're using that savings in a way that they enjoy. Not everybody is going to want to invest directly in stocks. We know that. So they can go for index funds or have friends do it for them. But in particular, we're creating a world where the people who do want to make a choice, it doesn't have to be all of your money, but buy your first stock. They start to see the fun and participate in capitalism. Capitalism is the most participative system that I can think of. Everybody is a buyer, a seller. Everybody's trading. We're buying from each other. You're really good at doing TV shows. I hope I'm not horrible at giving stock picks. Here we are trading, right? We're each. So it's such an awesome system. Everybody should be on board. And conscious capitalism, which is something we could or could not talk to. I know, Patrick, it's part of your background. John Mackey is a founder of the movement. But I mean, so I think everybody's doing that, and that's what the Motley Fool's working toward. And when more people are participating in capitalism, then which stock you pick starts to matter even more. Like, what do we want to fund? What's going to win? What's going to lose? Let's make sure that we're betting on the right horses and that we feel in touch with the purposes of the companies. One thing we never do at the Motley Fool is we don't advise people buy companies that they don't respect the products or services. We don't think, hey, it'll be a good stock, but they sell tobacco, so just buy it, but it may not be good for the world. No, we're like, your money should be exactly aligned with what you think about the world. In fact, if you really care about socially responsible investing, one of the most responsible things you could do is become a direct investor in stocks and not just give it to some fund manager who's making that decision for you. So I see a world that's more and more in touch with a proliferation of innovations that are for-profit companies and more people interested and excited. Maybe slightly less fantasy football. I feel like I'm pounding fantasy football for no good reason in this interview. Maybe it's just that time of year. But I think too many people care about sports and not nearly enough people care about their financial freedom. And I know the value of this. And I love this too. But it's like that, and that's the society the Motley Fool, I hope, is helping to create. With
a group of my entrepreneurial friends, we are putting together a book called The Moral Virtue of Capitalism, where each of us are writing that, because the practical aspects of capitalism are a foregone conclusion. But you're actually starting to speak to the moral virtue of capitalism. So can we dig a little deeper there as far as how you see that this system is really the right system and how human beings should live together and trade together?
Well, it's the story of humanity. In fact, a wonderful book called The Rational Optimist by Matt Ridley, he talks about how what makes us unique as a species is we trade. We trade goods, we trade ideas, we trade experiences, we trade across cultures. From the dawn of humanity, we started to rise out of the swamps when many other species weren't, because we traded. And more than anything, we traded ideas. Because I think it was Thomas Jefferson who said, an idea is like a lamp that's lit, and I can light yours from mine, and I lost nothing, and you gained something. And that's the story of capitalism. When we work together, when you do something you're really good at, and I do something I'm really good at, and we buy from each other, we both got a better quality product across both of those experiences, and the world starts to specialize, and that's obviously what's happened. America probably practices the highest, most advanced form of capitalism at scale today, and yet we still see so many ways that it could be improved and will be. But it's still such a great system, because at the heart of it, you have people doing what they love and do best, I hope. I hope we're all doing jobs that we love. And if you're not, and you're watching Patrick and me right now, change your job. I had one job before when I started the Fool, and I hated it, and I'm so glad that I walked away from it at the time. But so we should be doing something we're good at that we love, and then we should be buying that thing from other people. And then we should start corporations together and be invested together, and then watch our stocks triple or go up 300 times in value like Amazon.com. I'll close my answer by saying that, how did our dad get us started with the stock market? He said, hey kids, look, we're in Safeway here in Washington, D.C. at the grocery store. Chocolate pudding. We own some of the company that makes that chocolate pudding. We own some stock in them, just a little bit. Let's go get more chocolate pudding. So it made him an awesome dad because we were like 7 years old being told that we should be getting more chocolate pudding. But that's capitalism.
Right.
And it's a beautiful thing, well practiced, which it is increasingly today.
Well, and that's a perfect metaphor, I think, for what you've done is that the Motley Fool has brought to the world the idea of getting more chocolate pudding, making it fun. So somehow that little lesson from your father all those years ago has manifested, touching millions of lives around the world in a very positive way. And I think what's extraordinary is that you've injected vitalism, life, into something that was seen as a very kind of dry, marble facade, staunch, boring thing. You've turned it into something fun. You turn it into something that not only is employing people that are having a lot of fun with it, but it's touching millions of lives out there. So I know you're extraordinarily busy, and the fact that you take the time to sit and talk to us is just a testament to how much you really care about getting this word out there and getting your message out there. So thank you so much for spending this time, and I wish the Motley Fool many, many more decades of the foolish behavior and fun that you're having.
Thank you very much, Patrick, and thank you for featuring us on your show in this series. And I think it's great what you guys are doing, which is that you're trying to help all of us understand money better. It is such an important subject. It's often not taught in schools, even at the university or graduate level, and yet every day we're losing new adults upon the world who are going to have to make decisions the rest of their lives about money, and it's going to matter a lot. So let's keep spreading that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great to be with you. What David Gardner has proven to me is that when it comes to finance and wealth development, it could be fun, it could be stimulating, and it can work very effectively. That's what the Motley Fool has done. That's what David Gardner has taught us through that interview. I really hope you got a lot of practical information from it, but I also hope you had a lot of fun too. Thanks for joining me. What role do you think your mindset plays in your wealth development and in your future? I can tell you that my premise is it plays a huge role. It's the leading role. It all starts there. And Michael Bernoff is one of the best people in the world when it comes to wealth mindset. He has a presence. When he walks in a room, he's 6'6". He also has energy, focus, and he's developed ideas and practical applications of mindset that can absolutely transform your financial future, which is why you want to listen to my interview with him. Here it is. Well, Michael, having seen you speak multiple times before, I know we're in for a very lively conversation.
This is gonna be fun.
So let's talk about, how did you, a boy from Jersey, like me.
Two of us,
right? How did you end up doing what you're doing? What was your path?
Pain.
Pain?
Pain. I say it all the time to people, pain. I went into business for myself, and I thought it would be easy. I had a couple of great parents that, mom's a teacher, dad's an engineer, and that, they said that everybody that did well had a business. Nobody showed me how to do it, so I went into business with their whole attitude of, work hard, be a good person, and failed miserably at it right off the bat. So when
Did you go to college?
Yeah, I went to college.
Yeah.
I went to college, but in college, this is crazy. So I had a guy introduce me to direct sales and network marketing at 17 years old. I got started as an entrepreneur right in college. One of the guys that actually founded Under Armour is the guy that introduced me. I didn't realize it until years later. This guy, last name's Wood, one of the founders of Under Armour introduced me to a direct sales company, and I was hustling stuff. I knew how to talk. I knew the shtick. I could get people to do things, but I didn't really have the long-term stick in what I was doing.
So then you got out of college, you went into your own business, failed miserably?
I was almost not going to finish school. Someone gave me Rich Dad Poor Dad book, and literally looked at it, and they're like, entrepreneur, it was really for me. So it was like one semester left, ADD, have my own little business on the side, still failing miserably at it, but wanting to figure out how to do it. And I had to force myself to finish school. But when I finished, I never really went to work for anybody else. It was one of those things I've always said I wanted to figure it out. So it was a teacher in college that changed my life. I remember I failed out of Arizona State for a semester. Did a good job. Went for, it took me 5.5 years to get out. And at Mesa Community College, I took an interesting sales class. Couldn't get into the business school at ASU, never got in. I graduated with a communications degree. But one of the teachers handed me a book, a list of books. You could read anything from The Wealth of Nations to this, and one was How to Win Friends and Influence People. And literally got the book. I'm a single guy, How to Win Friends, Influence People. I'm 19 years old, and that book opened myself up to the idea of you can actually learn yourself better. I had no idea that. I thought I was stuck with what I had in life. I thought I'd work hard, and that book taught me the biggest shortcut in the world, that you can learn from others how to get what you want.
Wow. So where'd that lead you then? So you're failing in a business. What
Failing in
happened?
business, had a couple of businesses didn't work out, and then when I found personal development, when I found the ability to work on myself, to understand the problem was up here, that the reason I wasn't making the money I wanted, the reason I wasn't getting ahead the way I wanted was sitting up here in my head. It was one little meeting that I was at in California. There was a gentleman named Tom, and he was a pet safety guy of all things. And he walked up to me and he goes, "That was a great presentation." I'm like, "Actually, that was a sales pitch because you guess didn't work well because nobody bought anything." He goes, "You got a great presence. Have you ever heard of neuro-linguistic programming?" And he goes, "I used to work with, this guy back in the day, or you got a great thing about yourself," but I wasn't listening to him. And he's the guy that geared me towards understanding communication. So he has never actually went extremely far with this stuff, but he's the guy that actually got me started with two people. One was a book, and number two was a guy who just nudged me. And sometimes the littlest things nudge us, and they wake us up.
So you're talking a lot about headspace now,
Yep.
saying that you discovered that this is your headspace can really change your life, your outcomes, et cetera.
Changed everything.
So do you think that the primary determinant of the ability to create wealth is headspace?
I would say the primary ability to create wealth in your life is based on a little something which I would call your average. And I think most people in life, they're living an average life. And I don't mean you versus somebody else. I believe that you get to a point in your life, even when you're doing well. I've seen people that make a lot of money, but they're not wealthy.
Right.
And I've seen people that are broke, and they're definitely not wealthy. And what I've recognized is most people are, the way they've set up their life, their automatic autopilot they have for their life is to get about what they have right now, and anything else they want is a dream, is a hope, is a wish, and wanting it is so exciting and turns them on so much wanting it that actually having it isn't really in the equation.
Yeah. Meaning that they're always just pursuing.
The pursuing and the idea of wanting it isn't part of their current identity. Wanting it's part of their current identity. Actually having it, getting over the wall, to literally get from where you are to where you want to go is people's biggest challenge. And it's the mind, it's our actions, it's our attitude, but most people aren't aligned to be able to actually do that.
So how do they get aligned? So somebody's watching and saying, you know what? I'm where you were. I'm struggling. I'm failing miserably, but I feel like I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to create good income or wealth. And but I find these blocks. How do I clear them out? How do I get my headspace
There's a
right?
few things to work on. I figure if you're going to be put in a box, you might as well have a metaphor of what that box really is. So for me, I always think the box is the "I'll never go back there again" box. And I think the reason this thing typically gets created, it's a really good idea at first. You finally make a little extra money, you get out of a relationship you shouldn't be in, and you say, "I'll never do that again."
Right.
I believe people build our wall of what we want a little too far out instead of recognizing that we need to get where it is we need to go. But this is where the biggest challenge comes in for most people. It's in our identity. It's how you see you. That is the biggest challenge. So number one is to really change what your identity is and how you see you and how you perceive what it is you're doing. I think most people are wanting to do that. And I know the whole law of attraction and just wish it's going to be there. That's cute and all. But to actually get yourself to be a person that does it, there's a few things you have to change. And one of those is to accept that you actually have people in your life right now that cheer you on for being who you are. The biggest thing I'd say is one very simple word. Most people getting what they want is negotiable. And one of the terms I use all the time is non-negotiable. So getting what you want has to start to become non-negotiable. And part of that is actually working on what it is that you want. So I know the whole personal development space is don't talk about the word want because want means not having, but you actually have to work on what you want and understand there's a major disparity between what you have, what you want, and what are these like dream board dreams that are way out there. I feel that if most people actually were getting what they wanted, maybe not their ultimate dream, they'd be satisfied.
Right.
So what we need to do is to enhance our identity of how we see ourselves and start getting pieces of what we're looking for in our lives. So
Does this tie into the idea of what your average?
that's the whole average, yeah. That's my whole average thing. I mean, that's the whole average sucks. I mean, that's the point of everything. And I wear my shirts all the time. I'd say the average sucks, and people look at me like, they look at me and they say, so you're telling me like, you're right, average sucks. I'm better than them. It has nothing to do with me versus you. It's you versus your average. Like, so. Right. The question is for most people, like when someone says, Michael, like how tall am I? And I'm 6'6". And years ago, a buddy poked me. He goes, how tall are you? I go, I'm 6'6". He goes, you really just start to act like it. And he goes, most people really act about 5'6" and they're maybe 5'10", or they act 5'1", and the reason is we're only playing a piece of ourselves and we're getting away with it. And the reason is we're comfortable with where we're at. So by raising what your average is, like most people's income is about the same every year. They get about the same amount of money, and what's fascinating is anyone watching doesn't have to work as hard as they are. They'll wind up in the same place anyways.
Right.
You could sit on your ass for 9 months of the year. In the last 90 days of the year, your gears will kick in, you'll start to do it, you'll get super excited about it because, you know, that's who you are. You're the person that actually does that thing, earns that amount of money. To get the amount of money you want means you're gonna have to learn to change your average. And part of that is really starting to create new non-negotiables for yourself, starting to put things in your life and make them necessary for you to do.
Give me an example, like some non-negotiables that somebody might change. Like income sounds like one, saying,
Yep.
you know, I'm used to making $100,000 a year, and I find a way no matter what, whether I lose a job,
Yep.
I'm in a business, ups and downs of the economy, I still find a way to get to that 100,000. And you're right, I think people do somehow migrate to an expectation that they have,
Yep.
consciously or unconsciously. So how conscious is somebody's average versus, unconscious averages?
I don't think anybody really thinks about it. People weigh about the same amount of weight every year, or within the course of 5 years or 10 years. Everything averages out. It's fascinating. You have just about the same amount of fights every year. It's based on what your conversations are, what you're doing. So to answer the question and keep it simple, just give an example. Like, let's just say we got cameras around. Let's say somebody's watching this. Says, I've always wanted to be a photographer. I got a job. I work at a company. I make decent money. Well, you got a dream of being a photographer. You don't have a camera. You don't have any clients. You have nothing. One of the things we need to learn is how to jump over the metaphoric wall, to go to the other side and start actually doing what it is you want to be doing. Years ago, I had a guy that worked at Motorola. I'll give it an example, and he came to me. He came to one of our events, and he said, "Michael, I want to start to be a photographer one day." And I'm like, "You got a great income." I said, "Do you own any equipment?" He goes, "No, I don't own any equipment." So I said, "Why don't you go do that?" So he jumps over the wall, buys equipment. Now he's a guy that actually owns a camera. And then one day he says, "Hey, I want to shoot a birthday party, make $100 shooting a kid's clown party." So he jumps over the wall, shoots a clown party. It's non-negotiable.
Right.
Eventually, unfortunately, this guy got laid off. The economy went down. Motorola laid off a bunch of people. The guy now is forced to actually have to make this work. So now he's doing parties and weddings and bar mitzvahs and everything, and he's working on it, and he started to make it non-negotiable for ourselves. We need to work on what it is that we want and stop dreaming about it. And we have to be willing to do the little teeny things along the way. So when I think of wealth creation for most people, I think the relationship with money is part of their challenge, and the relationship with their average. I mean, I told a guy once, I said, "You're not gonna save your way rich, but if you start respecting money, like the fact that you avoid Starbucks, it's $7 a drink. Here you are wanting money, but you're going there 3 times a day." I had a limo driver. He wants to go see his dad over in Africa, right, for the summer. I said, "Where do you spend your money? You're not able to go." And he goes, "Well, I goes to Starbucks." He goes 3 times a day, plus the pound cake, spending $50 a day going to Starbucks, this guy. I said, "Why don't you just transfer $20? It's changing. This is gonna get you rich. But transferring $20 from your checking account to your savings account, that's all I'm gonna ask you to do. Make the transfer every single day. Just have it automatic that it does automatically."
So on a savings basis, it changes his average, right?
It changes his average. He comes to me a couple months later, he goes, "Michael, I have $1,600. I said, "It's not going to change everything, but it changed your relationship with money. You're actually starting to respect it." And most people don't have really respect for money. They don't have a great relationship with it. They don't understand it. They don't know where it comes from. It's not important to them.
Right.
Most people that aren't doing well financially, they have 0 books in their house on wealth. They have 0 friends that are making the amount of money they want to make. And they're not surrounding themselves with an appropriate relationship when it comes to money.
So those are, I think, 2 important dimensions. One is, like you said, what are you reading? Meaning,
Yep.
what are you feeding your mind?
Yep.
And then 2, who you're surrounding yourself
It's
with.
huge.
So can you speak a little bit more about each of those?
Yeah, I mean, what you're reading, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, I remember Jim Rohn was one of my earliest mentors I had years ago when he was alive. He was like I had my dad, and then that was like my business dad.
Right.
And he would teach me everything about money, and he said, "You actually are living the life that you're choosing right now." And I realized I had no money, and he said that's your choice, and that's what you're doing. And a lot of times that's a hard pill to swallow. So
Did you resent that at first?
I hated it.
Okay,
Couldn't
yes,
stand it.
yeah, because if somebody's watching us right
I don't
now,
like
and
that.
we're saying to them, you don't want to be rich, you don't want money, and they're like, "What are you talking about?" It's so how did you receive that, and when did you finally realize he was right?
I get it now. It's hard to accept that when you're in a situation. I always tell everyone, if you had more money, you'd have nothing to bitch and complain about.
Right.
So, and then you'd be bored because people's favorite thing is to bitch and complain.
Right.
So it's their favorite thing. I mean, if I asked you to eliminate complaining for, well, not you don't complain, and I don't complain either, because we like to talk about big things. And that's the thing, wealthy people, they talk about big things. All of our friends that we know, they talk about big things,
Right.
stuff that's happening in the world that's making it happen. But if you stopped complaining about your problems for a month,
Right.
you'd have no friends left, because that's what people talk about. They complain. So when I first heard that, I didn't like it. And then I recognized that in order to make more money, I needed to first accept I didn't have enough. And that is one of the most painful things for people to do. But once you get through that pain, like chapter 2 of our book is on adversity. And we say that the biggest challenge in the world today is people aren't very good at dealing with everyday adversity, because life has gotten super easy.
Right.
Little House on the Prairie back in the day when Pa was out there, I don't think he was bitching about going to the gym, right? He wasn't complaining like, I'm having trouble getting a Lifetime Fitness, because he worked out, he was out there. He had to learn how to survive. People who don't have adversity, life's easy. Kids are getting food delivered to the house, getting delivered to their school these days.
Right.
So life has gotten real easy, so is marketers' ability to take our money. So it's very hard to get ahead. So we've got a lot of info against us, so we need to empower ourselves better. So backtrack to what I was saying a minute ago about what Jim originally said, that you're living the life that you're choosing to live. It was hard to hear, but he also said, how many books do you have on being wealthy? And I had Think and Grow Rich, and I was broke. I had the magic of thinking big, and I thought small, and I liked to complain a lot. And I realized that I didn't understand Think and Grow Rich. I didn't understand that the book is in the title. You don't even need to read the book.
Right.
Change your thinking.
Right.
You've got a chance to grow rich.
Right.
Change your thinking, you can get wealthy.
Yep. Okay, so that's interesting, saying, hey, what are you reading? What are you putting in your mind? And that helps really create mindset. Books have totally changed my mindset, just reading
100%.
books. Now, talk about who you hang out with, because the old adage, you are like the 5 people you hang out with most. Is that true?
It's massively true, and it's their expectations you take on. You take on their expectations, you take on their standards, and a lot of times we play to the weakest link, and to the strongest link. So I like to be the weakest link, and that's why I attempt to surround myself with as much as possible with people. They don't have to be wealthy. There's different levels of wealth. I have friends that are billionaires. They're some of those fun people in the world, and they're very cheap, some of them.
Yeah.
I have friends that are absolutely horrible with money. They make $300 grand a year, and they spend $450,000 a year. I have friends that make millions, and they've got good lives. Some of them are married, some of them are happy, but the wealthiest people, the ones that have what it is you want, and their relationship with money is the one you want it to be. So if you don't have somebody like that in your life, one of the first things you can do is you can have audio mentors, you can watch things like this, you can get around those people and start modeling their behaviors, figure out what they're doing. That's a big step in the right direction for people.
You speak a lot about persuasion, and you're really an expert in that world, and I've heard you present on that. And
That's one of my favorite things.
Yeah, well, and you do it. I mean, it's an extraordinary presentation that you have on that, or a series of presentations. Is there a relationship between wealth development and persuasion?
The only way to get where you want in this world is through communication. Money comes from other people, and money comes from relationships. That's where it comes from. So let's get really clear that communication is the most underdeveloped and underutilized asset we have as human beings, and is the fastest way to get what you want in this world. If you need a loan, you have to communicate with the bank that they need to give that to you. If we're selling right now, and you have a business you need to sell, I need to communicate why my product has value. As a doctor, you need to communicate why they need to come back again, which brings in money. So all money comes in a form of communication, and it is the most underdeveloped thing in the world. The big sign at my office says, your future hinges on your ability to effectively communicate. Really think I should change that to, your wealth hinges on your ability to effectively communicate to get what it is you want. And I believe we're very misspoken. I had a guy come in the office the other day, young kid, just graduated from college, entrepreneurship. I said, how many classes have you taken on communication? One in 4 years. I asked doctors how many classes they've taken on communication, and they're having trouble financially. No classes. You can graduate from Palmer or East or West or any chiropractic school in the world and not take one class on influence of communication, which is the most fascinating thing in the world. So I believe that people can get there a lot quicker if they can learn how to influence other people, but also influence themselves. So this guy comes into the office, and the person doing the hiring in the office asks the question, what type of income are you currently accustomed to? Kid says, I don't know, what do you want to pay me? She turns around and says to him, whether we hire you or not will be one thing, but whoever you ever talk to again and they ever ask you that question, let me help you reframe that, because the difference is whether you're getting 25 grand a year or 100 grand a year is how you answer that question.
Did it sink in?
He got it, and waiters and waitresses are a great place to practice. You know, what kind of tip would you like? I don't know, whatever you feel like giving. I'm very obvious. Like, guys, it's $100, I'll give it to him. This is $1,000, I'll give it to him. I've done that before. It's a wealthy mindset.
Yeah, so here's what's interesting now. You talk about communication. Persuasion, I guess,
Yes.
is the cousin or the you know,
They're closely related.
They're closely
yeah.
related. So here's the question. You hear terms like, well, he's got or she's got the gift of gab.
Yep.
What I'm hearing from you is that, no, this is a skill that can be developed and learned. It's not like either you have it or you don't. Is that accurate? What's your premise?
I mean, there's a lot of things that happen from birth. You could walk out of the womb and I came out with my legs were crooked. I was born, I had cast in my legs like Forrest Gump when I was a kid, and I got out of that. You know, some people, they're breathe correctly when they're born. Some people wind up being more effective. You grow up in Jersey, you got to talk just to speak. It's part of, to get a word in my household, you have to. But the funny thing is people don't recognize in their hometown, I mean, if you want to get ahead, you go to Toastmasters. You can spend $100 a year. You could probably convince the guy to let you come for free. He'll clean the floors to spend imagine 52 weeks a year you did that. You want to get ahead. Like, most people don't recognize that if you even were a better communicator at your job, you'd make more money. You could take that extra money and create wealth with it, buying real estate, doing something on the side, reinvesting that money. He or she who communicates effectively, the wealthiest companies in the world are communication companies. If you think about Steve Jobs, he created a communications company. That's all Apple really is. All Microsoft is a communications company. How to get material out to people. Telmex, the wealthiest guy in Mexico at one point, is a communication company. So I believe anybody can learn communication, but you have to know it's a problem first. And not just say to yourself, well, you know, my problem is I'm not good with people. You don't even need to be good with people to be a good communicator. You have to understand people and be willing to understand human psychology.
So are there some fundamental things that, like, let's say, okay, I've never taken a course in communication. Most people haven't. So the likelihood is people watching this haven't either.
Nope, most people haven't.
Yeah. So what are some of maybe the basics or fundamentals? Like, are there maybe like a common mistakes that people make or some principles that they should learn?
Most people have to understand life is not about getting people to like you. And that's where I think most people go wrong. And if you want to get ahead in sales or business, it's about willing to risk the relationship. If you want to get ahead in your own relationship, you have to be willing to risk and say, will you marry me? You have to be able to, well, not you personally, but do you know what I'm saying? Will you marry me? Or being able to walk up to somebody and say, I think you need to buy this product. And what that is momentarily the relationship gets risked for a chance for it to be even better. You got to risk your muscle to make your muscle better. You have to risk your money to make your money better. And it's not about a home run. I had years ago, the guy wasn't communicating with me correctly. I came into a little bit extra money. I was maybe 22 years old. I had 30 grand and I thought I was rich. You know, I had 30 grand now. It's like, you know, you could blow that on a weekend in Cabo.
Right.
And not even on drinks and just being out there, just going to stay in a nice place. And I called a financial guy and I said to the guy, I said, can you make this money to more money? And he said, well, what are you planning on wanting to do with it? And I said, can you make it more? And I'm a young kid. I'm like, I heard that there were people that can get me more money. Can you? He goes, I have a fiduciary responsibility. I need to know what you want to do with it. Do you want to save it to pay back loans? Do you want to buy a house one day? I'm like, no, just make it more. And he goes, I cannot take you on as a client. And I realized, I don't think people have a clear path of what they want to do with their money, or they want how little people need to impact themselves. Like, most people want to get like 100% return on their money. They want to get 1,000% return. If you could find a way to get 8 or 10% every 8 years in your money doubles.
Yeah.
And that's the part most people don't realize. They're looking for this large thing instead of realizing the secret is in consistency.
Yeah.
And getting okay with being peaceful with the idea that 8% for most people over a course of a long enough period of time, you could double, triple, quadruple your money overnight, bam, 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 bam. And then you have extra money. When you find a big opportunity that can make you 1,000% return, do something big, you have the cash ready to do it.
Right. What are some of the bigger lessons you've learned then around money? I guess that's one of them, saying, hey, you know, it's more of a consistency game than trying to make big hits.
The big hits will get you killed. Have you ever met anyone that the big hits really worked out for consistently?
No.
I've had big hits.
Yeah. I've met people who got lucky, and I've gotten lucky sometimes, but you know, I thought I was smart, and that was the problem. Like the first time I bought a piece of commercial real estate, I almost better than tripled it within about 4 years when I sold it. And I'm like, I'm a real estate genius. And then then I lost on the next 3 deals. I'm like, oh, I was lucky.
Profit gone.
Yeah.
I see that all the time. It's like being out at a town. Like, I remember being younger and being out one night, and like, hey, let's reproduce last night again tonight. And you try as hard as you can. Night 2 sucks.
Yeah.
You can't reproduce it. So looking for the home runs, one of the biggest issues. I believe the biggest thing is education and educating yourself and taking a minute to understand wealth and understand what wealthy people do. They do different things.
Yeah.
I remember watching this thing on Warren Buffett. He's got a free calendar. He spends a lot of time thinking.
Yeah.
He's very, very concerned with keeping his thoughts clear in his head and getting around the right kind of people and keeping a really open schedule to hear about opportunities. And he's listening all the time to high-level opportunities. He's also got the right voices in his head. So when you ask me, when it comes to wealth or it comes to creating finance for yourself, I've recognized that there isn't just one way, and you have to look at the overall picture. So I'd say the first thing is really to change your relationship with money and stop having it be something that you want and start being something that you're beginning to create. And how you create it is just looking at where you're at. I mean, just accepting, like, taking a minute and, like, if you're not willing to take 5 minutes and go, here's where I'm really at. Here's how much I have coming in, here's what I have going out. I never wanted to do that. But if you don't take a minute and figure out where you're at, how on earth are you gonna figure out where you're going?
It's no reality in a sense, because some people, like, it's like, you want to ignore that. I don't want to know.
Not gonna balance anything.
Yeah. It's like almost in a sense, the example you gave of the driver who was spending all this money on Starbucks
Yes.
probably wanted to ignore how much money per day he was spending on Starbucks.
$50 a day, putting it right here in his belly.
Yeah, so it's like, coming face to face with that. It's like saying, okay, now I have to change my relationship here. I got to become conscious. Basically, is what it amounts to. It sounds like.
If you can respect your own influence and understand that you have a chance to impact the people around you, and as parents, we have an obligation to teach our children who are doing anything about money. We have messed them up completely just by life being so easy. We should make it harder for them.
Right.
But we have an obligation to people. If you could accept the power of your own influence, that your kids do what you do, by being able to risk the relationship and saying, you know what, we're not getting a Starbucks today, or we're not going out to dinner today, and being able to reallocate that money is enormous.
And that's what you mean by risk the relationship.
Risk the
basically
relationship.
saying that you might upset somebody. It's not like you'll never talk to your kids again, but saying I might cause somebody I care about to be upset by doing something that is going to be positive for their future.
Yes.
Yeah, or for their mindset or for their headspace, as far as saying, hey, they need to get out of being numb and become more conscious of what's going on around them.
We're pretty numb as people, and we're following the wrong group.
Yeah.
It's not complicated. You're just following the wrong crowd. I mean, I'm just going to tell you, like, if you look at what wealthy people do, like when the economy was shot, we'd go to Mastro's and with nice steakhouse, and it's busy all the time.
Yeah.
Chili's isn't filled up.
No.
But Mastro's is filled at, $1,000 dinner, and people are still going to Napa. They're still spending money. Maybe the fake people are not, the ones that hit the one home run, like the commercial real estate geniuses that both of us have been. Maybe that person didn't have a home run, but the people that created consistency, they weren't even like, it didn't even bother them. But I think also we get obsessed, and the wrong kind of obsession. I think people get where it's something that they want so bad that they build it up in their head and they build it up as this big thing. For years, Inc. did an article on me, and I talked about perception, and people talk about what they want with their life, especially wealth, and they talk about this big house on the hill, big home, big house, overlooking the ocean or the ski slopes or whatever it is, and they picture their kids being happy in the nicest Gucci attire and Lamborghinis in the driveway, and I'm like, well, where are you in the picture? They're like, didn't think of putting myself there. I said, what, did you die and they got the life insurance money? I mean, what happened? And being able to put yourself in the picture, meaning being there with it, and also building some of the challenges in advance. I like to build that stuff in. Like, so when I build a timeline for my life, I build trampolines and trap doors. I build, like, how am I gonna get rid of this job down the road? How am I gonna get rid of this thing that's gonna bother me? A trampoline that's gonna get me over one of these hurdles. And I build out a timeline of, and I like to see my challenges in advance and me beating them before I get through them. So when they show up, I destroy them. And that's what big companies do. They have contingency plans. And I think most people aren't prepared for a contingency plan. So one thing shows up, boom, knocks them over. But if you could be ready to go, oh, that's what Patrick was talking about. My real estate deal, I screwed up on one of those. Look, I'm halfway there. Then you're one of us.
Yeah. So given that backdrop that you just gave, what is your definition of wealth? How would you describe wealth? What does it mean to you?
It's changed. It's changed massively. You asked me when I was 22, it was $100 gazillion. I didn't have, all these kind of stuff. Now, wealth to me is not worrying about money, getting to a point where way more than enough is coming in, and structuring my life to make my life work for me. And that's the thing. So your wealth amount could be 200 grand.
Right.
Your wealth amount could be $35 gazillion. I have no interest in being Bill Gates. I have no interest in being Steve Jobs. It used to be my dream. I have no interest in traveling that much. I don't even like being on a plane that much.
Right.
But what I do like is not having to worry about money and my life working the way I want it to. Time with my kids, never missing a kid's sporting event. My life, I'm very wealthy right now. I have money in the bank. My money makes money. We did very well last year. I own buildings. I own real estate. I own properties. I got 7 or 8 mechanisms going all at once that are producing wealth for me. And my job is to, how can I do what I love all the time and have money coming in regardless?
Was it a gradual change going from, because very similar in a sense of, in younger years, the ambitions as far as,
Those
the,
days.
the billionaire ambitions, right? And then, but over time that really does, at least for me it did, and it sounds like for you, it changes quite a bit. And it sounds like, having some sense of security and having fulfillment is really, kind of the dimensions of wealth for you at this point. Was there a sudden realization, or was it kind of a gradual process for you?
I'd say it was gradual. I matured. You get married, you have kids, things change. I mean, that's the one thing people don't recognize. And having children immediately changes, then your needs change. And the things that matter to you change immediately. So back when you're single and you want to impress everybody, I wanted money to impress people. Now I want money for lifestyle and to leave a legacy and to be an example for my kids and to be able to support them in a way that they can have what they want and have what they need and help them out. So it changed over time, but in the last 7 or 8 years, I've been married 8, 9 years, and almost this year will be 9 coming up. And what's interesting is after being in a relationship and having a relationship with money where we're on the same page, and that's another thing. I think people have to be willing to have the relationship with someone they love, have that tough conversation to get on the same page. You want the most detrimental way to lose, and Napoleon Hill does talk about in Think and Grow Rich, be married to the wrong idea with the wrong person. It's not even the person you need to get rid of.
Right.
You need to get clear with them so you're on the same page. She's outspending, he's outspending, you're outdoing. Get clear on your vision together is big. So my gradual progression, I would say it came in when I started to get serious about investing. I went from a saver to an investor.
Yeah.
And I had a lady that was vetting us for years to help us with our money, and I met her at a seminar, very wealthy, and she only works with people in our industry, people that are making a difference. She fired all of her corporate clients she hated. She only works with people that are high level and that are care that she enjoys working with. And her first thing is, Michael, I want to get rid of things you don't need to be spending money on. Let's clean it all up. Let's teach you about the benefit of life insurance. Let's teach you all these things. So wealth came in with me starting to educate myself, but also I would say in that move, changed everything. Went from an investor to now owning commercial real estate to doing our events in our own buildings right now, instead of having to go rent hotels. So now I'm saving hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, reinvesting that money. So it was in a decision to just get consistent and really care that it was a weird breaking open that I had.
It sounds like one of the principles that I've heard through doing this series is that you earn your money by the work you do, your income, but you become wealthy through investing.
100%.
And so you agree with that premise?
You'll never get wealthy. I hear it all the time. I sat with a guy the other day, and I know this. He's like, oh, I said, looked at the guy, 33 years old. He's making $10, $15 million a year. He's investing everything back in his business. I said, are you saving some of it? He goes, yeah, I got a couple $100,000 on the side. I said, look, I know you want to invest back in your business for the 400% returns you're getting, but what if something happens here, you have nothing set up over here? And he's like, not listening, and that used to be me.
Yeah.
I did that 100 times. And now I'm realizing I'm building multiple entities in financial wealth management for myself that are making a big difference. So you gotta put in your sweat equity, you gotta put in your 10,000 hours, you gotta get good at what you do if that's what you want. But there's also a great way to get ahead. I've seen people, work on paying off their home quicker, and they pay off their home quicker, they stop eating out, they pay off their home quicker, they wind up saving $2,000 extra a month, reallocate that into real estate, rent it to their neighbors, 10 years later they're a millionaire.
Yeah. Amazing how that can work, right? And it's not as hard as one might think.
Decision. And that's the hardest part we have as human beings. Decisions are tough. Being something different. So like if you woke up tomorrow, let's change your hats. You're not you anymore.
Yeah.
You don't have the wealth you have. You don't have the beautiful stuff you have in your life. And you got a nice job and you're doing okay in the world or you want to get ahead. How comfortable would you be changing your identity to the people around you that you are actually working on this and you meant it? At the beginning, it's easy because either they're going to listen to you or not, but are you willing to go through 6 months to a year till everybody sees you differently?
Yeah.
Within 1 year, I promise anybody that you really commit to this, people will start asking you advice.
Yeah.
And that's the real ancillary benefit. They'll ask you advice, then you become the expert.
So you talk about influence. One of the things that's coming through to me in everything that you've been describing, and I could see the threads of influence in it all, but I guess the most important person to influence is to influence yourself. And that's really, because it's one thing, my mother used to say to me growing up, when you talk to yourself, watch your language. And,
That's good.
Yeah, it's not good.
Mom gets credit for that one.
Yeah, I remember her saying that to me as a kid. If I'd say something that was self-deprecating, whatever, she'd say, when you talk to yourself, watch your language, you're listening. So now,
Wow.
Yeah, when I'm looking at, how you're talking about communication and influence through communication, but then I guess you got to turn that in the mirror also, I guess, and say, okay, because you're talking about identity. So, so how do you influence yourself to create a new identity or to move toward a new identity?
Okay, so this is interesting. This is like high level, but everybody can handle this conversation. We warn our children about stranger danger and watch out people out on the street.
Right.
We don't warn our children about the internet to the levels that we need to, that there's all kinds of stuff out there that you gotta be careful what you look at because you can't unlook at that.
Right.
Okay, what you saw. In our minds, we have the ability to, everything we have that's ever happened to us is stored in pictures, sounds, and feelings inside of our brain, everything. The first time you get into an accident or your first time you're falling in love, how you store that and where you keep that in your head is completely up to you, but nobody tells us that, how much you make it matter. So your file for wealth is inside of your brain, but the question is it one that you got from someone else, or is it one that you want, or what do you want it to be? So when it comes to influencing yourself, the big question you have to ask yourself is like, are you going to accept that you're controlling the communication inside of your head? Are you one of these people that says, I can, maybe, sort of, I don't know how, or are you making it necessary for you to do? So when I go back to the word non-negotiable, like, are you really working towards what it is that you want? And the pictures, sounds, and feelings that you have inside of your head, are they aligned with what it is you're doing? And really taking a minute going, wait a second, I got some stuff I need to clear up. Like, I need to think about this. My dad always told me I wasn't good with money, or you always screw everything up. Do you want that voice in your head? You don't have to have that voice in your head. You cannot have that voice in your head if you want to be wealthy, or allow that voice to drive you.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the question. So how much are you really going to accept the power of your own influence over yourself? And once you accept that power, that's where the creativity comes in. So there isn't an exact answer that I can figure out in the next 15 seconds. If you want to give me a scenario, I can probably give you a solution for that. But I believe that it's your communication with you that's going to make it the easiest.
So now somebody's been watching this,
Yep.
and seeing the progression of these thoughts and ideas, et cetera. The conversation ends,
Yep.
and now they have to take a step. What's the step they should take?
First step you're going to have to do is decide, and not talk. Decide. And a decision is very different than talking. And I always say, watch where people's feet move, because if you're bowling, you know the direction of their feet. You can always tell, like, and as a chiropractor, you can tell like what direction people have been walking based on their shoulders and everything. You bowl and your foot's looking that way, the ball's going that way. So you're gonna have to move towards what it is you want. I'd recommend, if you want to change your relationship with money, number one is, how much do you have? How much do you really want? Accept the disparity between those two, and the difference between them is you being a different person. And really accept, I'm here and I want to be here. It is not about a location you're going to wind up, it's a state of being.
Yeah.
How do you become that person? Well, the first step in the right direction, like I tell anybody, if you're not willing to right now transfer $5 automatically a week, a day, a month, a year from one account to another, and take 5 minutes to do that auto on your thing, I won't even give you lesson 2.
Right.
Lesson 1 is that. You do lesson 1, you let it sit there for a week or two, I'll give you lesson 2. Lesson 2 is we're going to change your relationship with money. We're going to start figuring out what we're spending, what we're buying, and where the money is.
Yeah.
And you're going to get it from other people.
Got it. Well, I have to tell you, I feel like we could talk about this for
Years.
And I really appreciate you sharing your own personal journey, but then also kind of the wisdom that came from that you can share with the world. But the mindset of wealth is something that I think is really a complex, or can be a complex
Can be
area.
complex.
But I think you just simplified it a great deal, so I appreciate you sharing it all.
Look at it as a relationship, and look at it as one of those things, and start respecting money. And I think people have a lack of respect for it. Start looking how you spend it. You'll see how much you respect it. You start respecting it, it respects you.
Yeah.
It's like a great relationship. Buy it flowers sometimes. Take care of it. Pet it.
This is because people say, the love of money is the root of all evil. I said, what do you mean by love? Not lust, but love.
You don't have to lick it. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying? You just have to have a relationship with it.
Love is respect. Love is buying it flowers. Love is paying attention to
Visit it.
Yeah, visit it.
Spend some time with it. Figure out what you have. Spend some time with it, and ask yourself, like, if your relationship was a $100 and you wanted $1 million relationship, would you just settle with your $100, sit down with a beer and have a relationship with it? No. You'd nurture it, you'd figure it out, you'd bring it friends.
Yeah.
You'd help it grow, you'd help it do more. It's just changing your relationship with it and read it a bedtime story, read it a book, let it watch the video.
Awesome. Michael, it's been really stimulating and entertaining. So,
Me too.
Yeah, thanks so
I've been
much
enjoying
for
it.
Yeah, thanks so much for doing this.
Absolutely honor and a privilege, and love to help any way I can.
Do you see now the role that mindset plays when it comes to your wealth and your future? Michael Burnoff has studied this like no other person I know, and man, can he deliver it in a way that you can take it to the bank and make it work for you. So thanks for tuning into this interview with Michael Burnoff. Wasn't that terrific? Now we've completed episode 3 of our 9-episode docuseries, Money Revealed 2020. And I know that we covered a lot of ground already, but we're not nearly done. There's a long way to go, so I'm looking forward to the ongoing journey with you. Again, I'll just remind you real quick that you can own all this, and we also have some very special bonuses that you should be checking out. So if you're interested, the information can be found right here on this page. I will see you in episode 4.
What seems crazy in normal times becomes necessary in a crisis. And right now, the Federal Reserve is saying this is necessary. Monetary systems come to ends every 95 years. Well, I think it's a pretty strong bet that you're gonna see the dollar drop dramatically over time, but it could drop like that.
The first advice I would give to anybody that wants to get into business is don't start a business, actually buy one that someone else has built. Last year, over 6 million Americans started a company from scratch, and 96% of those will fail within a 10-year period, and 50% of them will fail inside of 1 year. Rather than start a business, go and buy one that somebody else has built and no longer wants to own. There's over 2.4 million of them for sale today.
I just started seeing what were other YouTube channels doing as far as their thumbnail or their title or the information that they were sharing. And the big one that stood out to me was give people what they want. These topics are super important to me. I'll bet you that they're important to other people as well. Topics like stimulus check, what's happening with Wall Street and the stock market. And it was like attaching myself to a rocket ship. I still do my day-to-day, I still do financial coaching, but right now I could quit everything I'm doing and do YouTube and provide for my family.